This is Elliot Serrano and Jose Melendez being joined by Avi. Today on CCW TV. Thank you for joining us as we come to you from Dreamland Comics in Schaumburg, Illinois. CCW TV, for those who have never watched the show before, are when a comic book writer and a comic book vendor talk about comics, comic culture, and the issues that surround comic books. And Avi is also, you dabble in art, right?
I dabble in art,
artist.
Lifelong comic book reader, and lover of the art form.
And a pretty good artist, if I say so myself. I think you're pretty good.
I'm a salesman at heart, so
At heart.
it's a hobby.
But the reason Avi is joining us today is because we had a discussion crop up on the CCW TV blog. It's something that Jose and I, we've kind of been accused of talking about this ad nauseum. It kind of annoys a lot of fanboys when we talk about this. So I'll tell you right now, if you're tired of us talking about violence towards women in comics,
or over excessive violence in comics,
over excessive violence towards women in comics, and bashing one of your favorite writers or whatever, you probably going to want to stop this video now and come back maybe next week.
But I'm all for violence, so
so
let
yeah,
me be your champion.
Exactly. So that's why we brought him here, is
That's why
to
we brought
balance
him
things
here.
out.
What happened was, if you pop in on the CCW blog from time to time, Jose writes what we know as capsule reviews. Sometimes you do very expansive reviews. We have guest reviews by CCW viewers. Iron Muskrat has written reviews. Variant Girl has written reviews for us as well. But last week or the week before, we had a series of capsule reviews, a bunch of Marvel books, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it was like four Marvel books. 4 or 5.
Invincible Iron Man. You talked about the end of the Stark Disassembled, which SAR keeps... SAR, I know you keep wanting us to talk about Invincible Iron Man on the videos. We'll talk about it when the next...
Yeah, because I already reviewed that on the blog.
And, of course, we had... you talked about... And I don't know why you did this to yourself. But we talked about Ultimate Avengers.
Not only that, I talked about that, and I talked about
Deadpool.
New Ultimates.
Was it New Ultimates?
And
the
the Deadpool.
Deadpool Core, was it Deadpool Core?
All that shit. I reviewed all in one column. I read them all in one night, and it was terrible.
The Ultimate Avengers review... Did you write that review like late at night or in the morning, or when did you write that?
I wrote all that stuff. Whenever I write reviews, I usually write them when I'm about 2 beers in, and I start about 9 o'clock at night. Okay. And then the longer the reviews go, the more I'm been drinking. So
because I gotta say that Ultimate Avengers review was...
It wasn't really a review so much as it was just a statement. On my part.
But it was pretty clever. The way... Did you read it?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
I did read it.
I gotta say, I really was amused. I was incredibly... I just laughed out loud.
It was like a little skit.
It was like a little skit. It was so amusing, in fact, that somebody...
Maybe that should be our next contest. Maybe we should have somebody perform that skit and videotape it. That should be our next contest.
That would be a good contest. Somebody was outside of our little circle here, were so amused by the review that they posted it on the Millar World boards. And, we're talking about verbatim, took the whole thing, put it on
Just
there.
copy and pasted it.
Copied and pasted it, and put a link.
You can do that in computers?
It's amazing.
I don't know.
It's something new.
Yeah.
It's something new. They just started that, like yesterday.
Cutting and pasting.
I
like it.
And
I like it a lot.
And he also put a link to the blog. So that post actually, and the subsequent post got a lot of views. And got noticed by someone who at first I thought was just going by the screen name Kung Fu Master. See, this shows what a dork I am, because I was going through all these posts that were in response to Jose's review, and I saw Kung Fu Master, Victim of Circumstance, and they're going, wow, the Millar World guys really have some interesting screen names there. So I cut and pasted Kung Fu Master's response to Jose's review on our blog. And I put it up, and myself thinking that Kung Fu Master was just a fanboy who was responding to Jose's review. This was Kung Fu Master's response. They're right. It should have been more boring. There's enough dull comics around, the bucko. They need a few more shocks. Okay? Now, this is me reading this as just some fanboy on the boards just responding.
Otherwise, you would have been doing an accent with that, right? If had you
well, come on, man. I'm trying to set something up here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Jeez.
Edit that. Edit that out. Sorry about that.
Well, it turns out, thank you very much.
Since Elliot is totally incapable of actually reading comic book boards, and this is probably why we don't have a CCW board, because this would be one of your moderators, and he wouldn't know what the hell's going on.
That doesn't make you a nerd, or I mean, it makes you actually the opposite of that. I can't read a comic book board. I'm a real nerd.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
That quote was actually coming from Mark Millar himself. I mean, I'm assuming Mark Millar because he was
his name, and it could have been a moderator who was signed in too. So
Mark
we
Millar.
don't really.
But the term "bucko" in there really makes me think it was Mark Millar, and I don't think Mark Millar's going to let just anyone.
You probably should have set up what I said in my review or my statement before you actually read that, so it was actually put in some context that would make sense to people who.
That was going to get me to the next part.
Oh.
Okay. Jeez.
Wow. Are you critiquing his thing
my
of your
storytelling.
review? Unbelievable.
Well, on top of that,
of his storytelling,
you gotta read. I'll send you the email of his review of my my script for my monthly. Oh yeah, it was a good one. Were you
was it supportive and helpful?
No, it was a couple of beers.
It was
late at night,
but it was honest though.
Yeah, it was honest. What are these shocks that Mark Millar believes need to be in comics to make them really exciting, to keep them from being boring? Well, if you haven't read Ultimate Avengers issue number 5...
Yeah, it came out like 3 weeks ago.
3 weeks ago. You have a shot of the Red Skull holding a gun to a baby's head. You have the image of a woman stabbing her husband to death with a pair of scissors, and you see the blood flying everywhere. You have the image of the Red Skull throwing said baby out a window. And then you have her, the woman after the baby's been thrown out the window, being tackled by 3 men. Cut to outside the door where you really don't know what's going on. And then the coup de grace, as you said in your review. You have a little blood splat here on the outside of the building where presumably the baby landed. So there's no doubt that...
You don't know that.
Oh, yeah, we know that. But anyway.
And then it was apparently picked up by some kind of carry-on or...
Yeah, exactly. Because the baby's not there. But
well, no, but you have these little bits all over, so it could have just, splattered all over the place.
Like a water balloon.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know how babies,
In either case, this is what got Mr. Melendez set off. It actually set me off, too, and set off a lot of folks. Because not only did you have the depiction of violence towards a child, the killing of the man with the pair of scissors, but in this panel here where the woman is tackled by the 3 men, it's implied that she's raped.
Well, and then when on the first page, when the person who's telling the story, Nick Fury, refers to her as a hot scientist.
Yeah.
A hot woman scientist. Not just a scientist, but he had to make it a point to say that it was hot.
Yeah.
And that she was hot.
And so it's strongly implied here in this panel that in these next 2 panels that she's being gang raped by these men. And Mark...
Could be just a little slap and tickle.
Yeah, pretty much. Mark Millar himself responds after saying that comics need a few shocks. P.S. Wasp wasn't raped. These guys were political torturers, but it wasn't sexual. Sexual violence in Marvel books is a bit weird, and I've avoided it, parenthetically, as far as I can recall. And this is a kicker, as this stuff is all available to kids. So Mark Millar really doesn't want to put sexual violence in his comics because he knows kids can read them.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the issue. Now, I responded on the CCW blog that I'm not going to call Mark Millar a liar. Okay,
That was an awesome Freudian
There
slip.
was an awesome.
That was awesome. Oh man! Wow, I liked Red Sun. That was
And if
good.
you actually think that Elliot planned to do that, anytime he plans anything, he flubs it and screws it up so bad.
That was pretty. Yeah, that was raw and honest.
Thanks for catching it. I'm not going to call him a liar, but I'm going to say that it was a very poor storytelling choice on his part.
Which part?
The setting it up the way he did. Because when you get to the end, really the only way you can up the ante as far as torturing this woman is by raping her.
Well, the end of that scene?
Yeah.
Well, in another a comment that Iron Muskrat made, he made a long comment on that review or on your response, and Iron Muskrat actually went to the Amnesty International website.
Oh yeah.
And the number one form of political torture is rape
against women and men.
Women and men.
Yes.
But that's the number one form of political torture. So someone maybe should do their homework before they try to.
Okay, just to play the devil's advocate here, I mean, aside from the fact that you have a bunch of guys basically groping this woman, which might not have been in the script, that might have been a choice by Carlos Pacheco.
Right.
I mean, and again, this is just something that I foresee at some point them taking off that silver mask. They haven't shown her face before, have they?
Right.
So they're going to have her take off that mask, and she's going to have some major scarring on her face. Mm-hmm. That's what the longest night of her life. That's what it's going to be.
Yeah, that was another part that
right.
They refer to as that was the longest night of her life.
Yeah, but that really doesn't mean anything. I mean, they could have raped her and disfigured her.
Sure.
And here's the thing. I mean, I know you're playing the advocate, but let's look at this again. Back to the storytelling choice. Okay, Mark Millar doesn't have a problem with having the Red Skull. Showing the Red Skull with a gun to a baby's head.
Right. And then a close-up.
And then a close-up of it. And then to the next part where there's no problem with showing the woman stabbing her husband to death because, it's not implied. You see the blood going everywhere.
It's off screen.
Yeah, but I mean, come on. Panel. Where else are you going to get all that? And you see the baby being thrown off the window.
Right.
All right, you see it. You can't depict sexual intercourse in a Marvel superhero book. So what can you do? You go to the whole we're outside the door where it's the silent outside the door. Notice how there's no onomatopoeia or anything. You don't hear any sounds.
Right, no, I understand.
If she's being politically tortured, why not show her with like the black bag over her head?
Right.
I mean, he didn't have a problem doing that in Kick-Ass where the kid's nuts were getting electrocuted.
Yeah, I mean, but in all honesty, I know what you're saying, but at the same time, like if someone You can't say beyond. I know the implication.
It's a very strong.
It's an elliptical image that makes people think rape, and it might very well that could be justified. My problem with the whole thing, I mean, and again, like I don't think there's a big problem with having violence in comics, especially one that's done for it's a parental advisory comic, but it should be compelling, and it's still boring. I mean, it's shockingly boring. It's still a boring scene. I mean, for someone who's babies being thrown out the window, scissors going into scientist husbands tied up prone bodies, it's still an incredibly boring scene because there's nothing dramatic. It wasn't shown dramatically at all. It's almost like it's filmed, so to speak. It's drawn like a 3-camera sitcom. I mean, there's no shadow. There's no close-ups of any of the victims. The only close-up you see is the baby's crying face, but they don't ever have a close-up of like the woman. I mean, there was some real chance to really chew the scenery with some of the acting, quote unquote, in that scene, and it wasn't done. I mean, it's very I'm not sure if that was a choice in the script or if that was just Carlos Pacheco maybe feeling it was a distasteful scene to draw that. I don't know. Yeah. But I thought there was no emotional charge to that whole scene.
You do make a point again for Pacheco probably saying I need to figure out a way to depict this without going too over the top.
Because I mean, when I was reading it, I was like, man, I wonder how Carlos. I mean, that was one of the first things that I thought to myself. Is like, man, I wonder what Carlos Pacheco thinks about this. But I never even thought about the fact that he might have toned down the script. I mean, we don't know for sure.
And I'm not saying
had to find a way to get that action across, but he couldn't really,
without making it too gratuitous.
Exactly.
I mean, it was gratuitous.
My point is not to show the violence on panel. I'm talking about just to show some emotional resonance in the characters' faces. Mm-hmm. And to me, I don't know if it's something that he just didn't feel like was necessary, but when they show this woman, her baby being thrown out the window, it'd be nice to show a reaction shot of the lady's face. There's a chance to show some real acting in that face, and there isn't. I mean, they don't show.
Yeah, they don't show it. You're right.
I mean, they don't have that. They don't have anything where she stabs her husband. It would be nice to have a close up of her face, showing the reaction.
Right.
And that's why in this thing, when you read it, I don't feel like there's any connection to any of the characters. Yeah, it's terrible thing that's happening, but I don't even get to see anything from her response to it.
Right. Well, and this is also being told by Nick Fury, as a recap. So, to me, though, what the issue here, outside of how the quote unquote violence or depiction of violence or implication of violence was context for one, that it is in an Avengers book, and beyond that, this was my biggest pet peeve about it, is that Mark Millar kind of tries to take the high road. I mean, he does this whole thing where he goes, I don't believe in sexual violence in Marvel books because kids can read this. Okay?
Yeah. Has he ever read a Brian Michael Bendis comic?
But on top of that, in the same book that where anything goes, he doesn't have a problem with this depiction of violence towards an infant,
right,
or violence in general.
Well, I mean, his quote is that he thinks that sexual violence is a little weird in comics, but apparently, violence is
fine,
fantastic,
right?
Apparently, yeah,
or acceptable for kids,
right? And again, I mean, you watch a lot of violent movies. I'm sure you perpetrate a lot of violence in your life. I don't know. I don't think. I mean, I'm not saying that everything should be comics code nice and clean. I mean, I get it. It's a mature reader's comic or whatever you want to call it, but just make it like a compelling image. Make it like not a compelling image, but like a compelling scene. Now, as a writer, in that situation, wouldn't you feel like maybe having just Nick Fury just tell the story might have been actually more effective than showing a flashback?
Yeah, because people's imagination is a lot more horrific than what you
can
actually...
Yeah, but again, what we're saying here, even Mark Millar himself is saying he's going for the shock value. I mean, he's saying it himself. There's enough dull comics around, bucko. They need a few shocks.
Yeah, and they're called Kick-Ass, and they're called Ultimate Avengers, and they're called War Heroes. Those are some of the most boring comics on the racks.
But he's doing it for shock value.
And we even come out and said that he just does stuff for the shock values. And
he's admitting it. He's admitting
revels
it,
in it. It's just like there's just no substance to hardly any of his stories. And you're right. It's just boring comic with just these kind of things thrown in there to try to get some kind of response from the reader, and you're kind of cheating.
Let me make
Can't you tell a compelling story?
You're a big fan of the movie Kill Bill, right? Mm-hmm. The movie Kill Bill has a lot more violence towards women depicted in there. I mean, the main character, and I bring this up because this is obviously being set up for a revenge fantasy type of thing, because the Wasp is gonna, she's revealed to. Can I say that she's revealed to be the?
Yeah, it's in
there. I think he even makes a comment in his response. So, I mean, obviously they're gonna set up that kind of revenge. The revenge fantasy archetype there, that's fine. But, when you watch the things happen to the bride in that movie, you actually feel bad for her, even though you get like a very small glimpse of her before this all happens in that wedding scene, I mean, you're looking at basically the same amount of like time to establish it. The way it's filmed, and in this case would be the way it was drawn, the way it's actually laid out, makes you have some kind of emotional connection to the character. This movie, this comic book does not. And I know I'm comparing movies to comics, which is a big no-no, but I mean, really, in this comic, I don't feel like they're all ciphers. There's nothing to it.
You make a good point, especially I think going back to Kill Bill. Any of the books, any of the movies that Quentin Tarantino does, where there is a significant amount of violence, and violence against women too. Mm-hmm. And we're not trying to say here. I mean, we get criticized a lot that we don't like the idea of violence against women. And I'm going to tell you right now, I found the husband getting stabbed to death with a pair of scissors to be gratuitous as well.
Mm-hmm. So, of course, yeah.
So, but what I'm saying is, you're right. The context. Quentin Tarantino doesn't get enough credit for the idea that he creates very three-dimensional women in his movies.
And a lot of that is the acting. I mean, it's the acting, it's the cinematography. A lot of it.
But that's him as a director getting that out of those women.
Exactly. Yep.
Which means he appreciates them as characters. In something like this, I don't get that Mark Millar appreciates the Wasp as a character. It's just she's, as you said, a cipher, just a pawn that you move from one place to another for the purposes of a plot and getting a shock. It's the equivalent of a little kid, grabbing somebody's puppy and hitting it with a hammer so that they can get shock out of all the other kids on the playground.
And again, I understand, the horrific story angle is going to be set up for her getting her revenge on the Red Skull, I'm sure, at some point. But, I mean, I think it would have been more effective had they, like you said, just had it be in the reader's mind's eye and had Nick Fury just mention it. It might be a little more exposition, but, rather than, take up 2 or 3 pages, however long that was, I mean, there was really nothing in there that was even. There was no moodiness to that image. It was everything was starkly drawn, fully lit. There was nothing in there that would even give you an emotional reaction to what happens. It's just very blah.
Yeah, but that's also our opinion, because if you look at the Miller World boards, everyone was talking about how deliciously degenerate it was, and I'm
really,
yeah, that they loved it, that the violence was incredible, and that the Red Skull, he's portrayed as such a vile character, and the rape scene, even though it wasn't a rape scene, really made him come across as evil, and blah 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 blah. There are people who
So these are people who really just love lazy storytelling.
Well, because
isn't he a Nazi? Is the Red Skull a Nazi?
Yeah, he's a Nazi.
Isn't? I mean, I know he's always a Nazi in the regular Marvel universe. I don't know if this new one is a.
I don't think he is, actually,
or a neo-Nazi or whatever.
He's Darth
the
Maul,
guy's got a red
actually.
skull, for God's sakes. I mean,
He's Darth Maul.
You don't have to show that he's
horns.
despicable. He's evil. He's
Yeah,
evil.
well, exactly. That was my whole point
you
in
don't have
the
to,
review. Is like, you don't need. I mean, it's ridiculous that how much do you have to push this character? But we already get the fact in the first 2 issues of this book that he's evil. He's killed everybody he's ever met.
Right, but the thing is, they're trying to set up the fact that she was victimized, and then so that you'll feel for her when she does show that she's, she does overcome the situation and probably kills the Red Skull at some point. It'll probably be 2 issues from now on the last page, and she'll say some tough guy line. It'll be a full blown shot. Because I mean, and again, the thing with Mark Millar's whole notion of, hey, I don't want things to be boring. How about you not end every goddamn comic book with the same technique of the one page and somebody saying something cool, like a hard ass line. I mean, it's been going on since the first goddamn Ultimate series. I mean, it's everyone is the same. It's like full shot, usually close up.
Line here. Yeah, it's pretty stupid.
So you want to read that out loud for the viewers, or
shut the fuck up?
I'm just saying. Do you want to?
No.
I don't know, because just as an example of what it is. I mean, that's what it is.
That's what it was.
Was it shut the fuck up? You sold that one, man.
See,
that was good.
That
was good. I thought you were telling us. Oh, okay.
Yeah. All right, so let's move on to the next segment here, because this rant is going to take way longer. When we come back, not only are we going to talk more about that Mark Millar kind of trying to tap dance his way around this. But we're also going to point out some other writers who could be held equally accountable for gratuitous violence in mainstream books. So we hope you join us.